Oh, good Lord. My name is Brett Ballantini. You can call me Brett. This is podcast number 35, I think. Lost track. Lost track of a lot of things this year with the Chicago White Sox. We're here to talk about the Chicago White Sox for as long as I can stand it. And who knows what we'll break into otherwise. We've got a crew of four other Side Sox writers, including back bad nationwide with an alcohol shelf that he's going to be tapping into. Oh gosh, golly, over these next 6 weeks. It's Trevor Lines. We coming out of Louisville? Where are we coming out of?
Yep. I am in Louisville.
All right, straight out of Louisville. We got Jordan. Oh my God, I'm going to get it wrong every single time. I'm going to say this time, Jordan Haas. And okay, close enough. I'm getting closer and closer. Now, Jordan has just joined up with us. She has taken on Bird app recaps, killing it there, but really at this point, questioning the decision to go all in with the White Sox to the point of actually writing for them. But hey, listen, join the crew. We all suffer in such a way. His internet was almost out enough to save him, but no, it came back enough that Dante Jones has to join us for this podcast. And some sort of migraine, gray hair, pain, sickness has taken half of our Indianapolis field office away from this podcast. So supporting the way to both, the cubicles are very vacant right now because only Joe Resis is occupying the Indianapolis field office right now. Joe, thank you for joining. Okay, I tried to delay talking about this Chicago White Sox team for as long as I can with extended, foolish, and mispronouncing intros, but the White Sox are 3.5 out of first place. Their record is something, I don't really care. It's 500. It could be 1660, 1550, 100, 100. I don't know. The stretch of easy games where they were supposed to win 12 out of 19, I think was the consensus that I demanded everybody agree to. I believe right now 8-8. So in theory, could make a big rally against Detroit and still win 11 instead of 12. And boy, will we be excited thinking the White Sox will be going to the playoffs. White Sox have just lost in Kansas City 3 or 4 games. I conservatively, doing my dumbass prediction thing for the rest of the season, said the White Sox would split. It's pretty tough to win a 4-game series, especially when it's 4 games in 3 days. But they managed to make me seem really foolishly optimistic because they could not win a series against Kansas City, a team actively trying to punt the season. So let's just start as we usually do. It's the biorhythms moment of the podcast. And let's talk a little bit about how you're feeling coming out losing 3 of 4. I'm going to go to the top corner 2 block down to Indianapolis. Joe Resis, tell me how you're feeling.
Not too great. Yeah, there is a lot to talk about as far as what has gone wrong. But yeah, I think at the end of the season, we may look back on at this series that just happened in Kansas City as being like, the moment where, the season truly felt like it was grinding to a halt. Like, I mean, I guess there are in a season with a lot of small ups and downs resulting in that 500 record. There have been a lot of bad moments mixed in there along the way, but there's always been the silver lining of, well, the division is very weak, and later on in the schedule they'll have a lot of easy opponents. But I mean, they've used up a lot of their easy opponents now, and yeah, like you said, 8-8 just won't cut it against that recent schedule that they've had. And yeah, that's a difficult pill to swallow, but yeah, that's what we're up against right now.
Yeah. Okay, Jordan, you made it clear you are second guessing your decision to commit to the White Sox in the form of actually writing about them. But as a fan, how you been feeling? It's really been great since you've joined up with us.
Yeah, we've won a total of 2 games since I've joined. I think my prediction Sunday night was we went 3-1 and we did the exact opposite. But at least it wasn't Crystal's prediction where we get swept.
Oh yeah, it's the truth. Is the truth. Yes, that was the one that I wanted to go along with, Jordan. And unfortunately, White Sox were not listening. It's rare. Hello, Rick Hahn. Do something, Rick, do something. Okay, Dante, vibe check. Where are you at with this team?
Well, Tim Anderson's injury kind of put a damper on things. I was at the friendly confines at about the same time they said 4 to 6 weeks. I'm just like, well, I'm already at a Cubs game, and now I get screwed more. So that was nice.
Yeah, it's
At
like it can't
least-
get worse.
Like at least it gives me no reason to commit to watching every game the rest of this year. Because in my opinion, Tim Anderson going down means this team's done for the season.
Yeah. Yeah, really sort of burying the lead there because that is going to make it really tough to climb back. Even just 3.5 games, as ridiculous as that is. But Dante, thanks for signing up for Sunday. You can't get out of it now. Okay, Trevor Lines, out of nowhere. The team is so bad, it has forced him to resurface on Side Sox Podcast. I myself am delighted, but Trevor, your thoughts. Try to compress 2 months of thoughts into just a minute or two.
Yeah, I think I mentioned it in our Slack chat, but it seems like there's been a lot of new lows throughout the season. But there was always the fact that the Central Division was so bad, and it seemed like every time that the Sox would get too far out of it, the Twins and the Guardians would go on a little losing streak, and the Sox would kind of stay right there. And today was one of those days where I think it was the bottom for me, just because they had Cease on the mound, and he's the guy that, you know, you can count on a win typically. And the way that they lost, leaving all those runners on base and not executing with less than 2 outs, and then the fact that the Guardians won on top of it to put even more distance, it was a tough blow.
But Trevor, you're close enough to your playing career to know how important 13 hits are, even when you only score 2 runs.
Yep. Yeah. 13 hits, not much for extra bases until the game was somewhat out of reach. So it's tough to string those hits together when it's a bad, fundamentally team. If you don't do the little things right and also don't hit for power, it makes things tough.
All right, Adrian Serrano, I know you wanted to avoid this podcast if at all possible, but no, unfortunately, we dragged you into it. Thank you for showing up. And please now give me an update on how you're feeling about the White Sox team that has just gone to Kansas City and lost 3 or 4 games that they need to be winning.
I've turned a corner on this team. Like, this is actually officially, I'm on record now. This is officially my favorite team of all time. I feel like I'm never going to see another team like this. Like this, every time I turn on the TV, there's something that I never thought I would see before. And like, so I'm just trying to like take it for what that is. And this is, you know, it's entertaining, and it's definitely a team that I will never forget. Like there's just, I can't, there's no words sometimes for it. And there's no use getting angry at it. I'm just like, I'm in awe. I am in awe of the 2022 White Sox team.
That's a valid point, but Adrian, talk to me next August. We'll see about that.
You're only 4 games back, you know, in the loss column. So I'm not panicking yet.
Hey, Steve's jumped off the train, so we're the only ones carrying the loss column anymore. All right, listen, Tony La Russa, at least within our group, Luke Smales, the other half of the rumored Dugout Metrics podcast that Trevor is part of, rumored at least. He pointed out, you know, that Tony had a particularly bad post-game news conference, and, you know, who cares? They're all bad, right? But it got me to thinking, if there's anything, what should Tony La Russa be doing? I mean, okay, besides the obvious, I know he should quit. Okay, no, we're not going to give, that's not the answer you can give. That's a cheat. But what could he be doing? Is there something he could be doing he's not doing that you would like to hear? You know, Ozzie Guillen is not exactly, you know, the best template here. He's a guy who would claim he would take hits for his players, which he did sometimes, but then he was also good at throwing them under the bus. It seems like something that's a little bit different than what's being done here. What Tony just either is just sleeping through things, or he's not going to come out against anybody unless the guy speaks the truth. Like, I don't know, Johnny Cueto just a couple games ago, questioning maybe a little bit of the heart of the fire in the clubhouse. Is there something he can be doing at this point? Again, besides quit, because we know none of us want him here, certainly not now. Is there something that he could be doing to make you feel a little bit better about this team, or that the team is being managed in a way that might allow them to rally? I mean, as much as we joke and laugh and as pathetic as this team is, they're 3.5 out. They're literally one series from perhaps potentially, theoretically, mathematically being a first place team. So the season is not over as much as we laugh about it. Is there something he could be doing and practicing to the media, to his team, that you're not seeing?
Yeah, for me, it's tough. He's been out of the game for a while. He's definitely up there in age, and when you hear him talk, he just doesn't have that fire, that energy, that type of even vocal inflection that can get people to rally around you. And I don't know if he has that in him. Yeah. So I would say, if possible, just show a little bit more energy yourself. But obviously, from his comments before the game today, he doesn't think they have a problem with a lack of fire, and took exception to Cueto bringing that up, which all of us can see pretty clearly from the outside looking in, that it seems like some of these guys are going through the motions, and don't, I always say I would love, after Moncada strikes out or something, just to see any sort of emotion, whether it's negative. If Moncada snapped a bat over his knee, I would love that, just because it shows that he actually cares. And you can't really see that from the outside looking in right now with a lot of these guys.
Yeah, I mean, the extreme is eyewash, of course, but to never see it from really almost any of these guys is, I mean, that's almost, to Adrian's point, that's almost like mathematically impossible. They're competitors. A lot of these guys have been in the game for years. I mean, they've all been playing since they're little kids. Yeah, extraordinary lack of fire, and it does come from the top. And you got to figure at this point, Tony just doesn't have it. Last year you get away with it, they're winning. This year they are just clearly not winning. Other things that perhaps jump out to you that you might want to see from Tony that could just make us feel any better is just a lost cause.
I really don't think there's anything that he can do at this point. Like, the kind of, everybody is pretty morose in that clubhouse. And you said, like, there's just no energy to be had. So, like, I don't think anything that Tony could do as a manager, I think it'd be nice if he was a little bit more, transparent and spoke like a human being, to the press, instead of like just so stuck in that 80s and early 90s mentality where, like, I'm smarter because I'm the coach and I will not, even begin to let you question the intent or the, the effort on the field. But, like, you don't have to be Ozzy and call people out by name, but you can say that, like, hey, we suck right now and we don't want to do that anymore, and we're working hard to try not to suck anymore. And, like, there's nothing wrong with saying that. That's, yeah. If your guys can't look at themselves in the face as a 500 team that was supposed to be running away with this division and say that we suck this year, then there's more problems than just Tony.
Adrian, talk to me when you're not only a Hall of Famer baseball person, but also, like, went to law school. Okay, he is better than all of us. All right, I got news for you. Newsflash: he's better than all of us. Any other thoughts on Tony La Russa, or is it just a sickening topic that we should pass on?
I mean, at this point, it feels like everybody said, like, there's no energy from the team. Like, that's a big thing. Again, like, when you're winning, you're always going to have energy. Even when you go through a rough stretch, you still got energy because you've been doing so much winning. And there's not very much Tony can do about that, because, I mean, this is a 500 team this season. There's not much, like, unless they go on a Cardinals last year or Mariners early this year type run, they don't even have to worry about playoffs. They'll be done October 3rd or 4th at the latest, all that fun stuff. They could win the division, but, I mean, if you win the division, you're still not getting, like, the Mariners come in, Julio Rodriguez, 3-run home run, top of the 3rd inning or something. There's nothing Tony can do at this point. There's nothing anyone can do at this point. This season's become a wash to me.
Yeah, Tim Anderson could come back for the last couple of weeks of the season. Yeah, right. Come on, last 2 weeks of the season, the Sox going to be 10 out, or maybe not. It's been a dance all year, and it's just impossible for any AL Central team to bury any others. Although I got to say, not to cite my stupid article again, but Cleveland was playing better than they would have been anticipated. And that is a dangerous thing for the White Sox, because the White Sox are playing worse than anticipated, as evidenced by this last 4-game set. Another thing that came up in our group is Frank. Well, it's everywhere, right? Frank Menechino. He's a fall guy for the White Sox offense, as he should be. He's the hitting batting coach, quote unquote. He's made his, like whatever controversial, thing about fuck the long ball, like, oh, I guess that means you're supposed to hit grounders. That can't be what he's actually promoting, but maybe it is. The stats rolling around now from, I think, is Jeremy Frank. 70% of the White Sox hits this year are singles. And the company in recent history that has the White Sox keeping is, well, let's put it this way. It's not strong company. It's not a group that you want to be with, like 12 Marlins teams. It seems to me to be a little bit of a straw man to blame too much on Frank. The players still hit. I can't fathom that if he says hit ground balls, they're going to go like, oh, okay, coach. And just like stomp the ball into the ground. They're not going to do that. But obviously it comes from the top. There's something weird going on organizationally with this team where they want strikeouts and ground balls. I don't think that's winning baseball. Trevor, you can check me on that. But where's the fault lie with this offense? Because clearly, as much as you want to defend it, and as much as there have been some decent performances, I guess Abreu, I don't know. I guess it was Mendick before he killed himself. The offense is the problem. And where does the fault lie, guys?
I'm gonna take the absolute stance again. It is Menechino, but not in the way that, I mean, you were saying he's like, telling them to hit ground balls or whatever. I think it's a fundamental hitting change with a lot of the guys. It's like someone noticed, I think last year, that Eloy had changed his stance since he'd gotten back from his injury. And that might have been something to do with his injury, but it could have also been something to do with like Menechino being like, hey, change your stance. You can hit whatever. But it's a team that should be hitting home runs, isn't hitting home runs. I'm going to take the bold stance here and say that nobody's going to hit 20 home runs in this team. I'm going to take an extremely bold stance there. But it could be a bit of the deadened ball because we've seen so many balls die on the warning track, but we saw a lot of balls die on the warning track in Kansas City, where in a lot of other places they would have been out. But it seems like there's just not enough power. Even if it wasn't just hitting singles, there's just like 10% power loss that is just affecting everything, especially with the new balls.
Yeah, Trevor, I think you brought it up in the group. Is this just a matter of like the bad luck catching up with them? Is this? I mean, you could say, geez, they'd have, they're 5 feet from 50 more home runs. Is probably not the case. Some of these things are just the way the ball bounces. But is this just sort of luck evening out?
So a couple interesting things off of that. It does seem like they've hit a lot of warning track fly balls and balls that are close to getting out. So I was checking into that yesterday. I put up a tweet about it, but the Twitter account it's like I think it's a bot account, but it's called Would It Dong. And basically it just takes the exit velocity and the launch angle of home runs as well as the distance and says what parks the ball would be gone in versus would not be gone in. And there was a guy that actually compiled all of those into a spreadsheet. The White Sox don't have anyone in the top 90 of the MLB in most home runs that could have donged but did not dong. So it doesn't seem like that's the case. Watching it firsthand, watching every game, it may seem like that, but in reality, there's a lot of other hitters that are flying out to the warning track just as much, if not more. And then as far as the batting average on balls in play that you were talking about, what I found interesting with that is since 2019, I took the road batting average on balls in play. And the reason I just took away games is because that takes the park factors out of things. So Fenway Park or Coors Field obviously have a higher batting average on balls in play than a lot of these other places because of the Green Monster and because Coors Field has such large dimensions and thin air. So anyway, going off of that, the White Sox road batting average on balls in play for the last 4 years is 326. The next highest in the entire league is 306. And the difference between the White Sox and second is the same as the difference between second place and 23rd place. So the White Sox are a huge outlier there with a high batting average on balls in play. And statistically, line drives and ground balls have a higher batting average on balls in play. Fly balls, if they stay in the park, which would mean they're in play, are typically outs. So going off of that, it does seem like the White Sox are hitting a lot of line drives, a lot of ground balls, and they have the second highest opposite field rate over that time. So I know I threw a lot of stats in there at you, but what that boils down to me, especially taking what you said about Menechino with those Marlins teams that also were singles hitting teams, it seems like his philosophy is really hard line drives, make sure you're using the whole field. And that might have unlocked Tim Anderson in 2019. So I have to give him credit for that. It seemed like when TA started using the whole field is when he really took off. But on the flip side, with all these big boppers in the White Sox lineup, focusing so much throughout the entire offseason, drill work, all this stuff, swing work, mentality, all focused on using the whole field and keeping the ball on a line, might not be the best philosophy in the modern day baseball with all these power hitters.
So just quick follow-up before the rest of the field can answer this. Then I'm taking a stupid stance like, well, okay, he's not telling people to beat the ball down into the ground. Okay, that's stupid. Nobody would do that. But do you think perhaps a little bit of this, use the whole field or go the other way, might be having this sort of sneaky, which on surface sounds very healthy and a smart strategy. And as you pointed out with TA, that was a big thing for him. But maybe that's hurting other guys with that sort of that philosophy could maybe like seep in and actually undermine some of the power on the team.
Yeah, I mean, using the whole field is great. And that's been the philosophy before we had all this advanced analytical data, is make sure you're using the whole field. And, but statistically, it's easiest to hit home runs to the pull side. So it's a much harder if you're trying to hit home runs oppo or hit home runs to dead center field. The majority of home runs are going to come to your pull side. So a lot of modern day hitting coaches are kind of saying, screw trying to go the other way. We're going to wait till you get your pitch to drive pull side and turn on that thing. And obviously that's not really what Menechino is doing. And you're right. He's definitely not telling them to just beat it into the ground, but such a focus on using the whole field and hitting hard line drives. Like I said, it may not generate the home runs that we're looking for.
Okay, in spite of Trevor's extremely reasoned and embarrassing me with all his great facts, anybody else siding with or putting maybe a little bit more fault on the backs of the players here? Because after all, coaches are hired to be ignored. But anyway, other thoughts about Frank?
I mean, I think we have like all that data just because those three Marlins teams were Frank teams and this team is a Frank team. Like, it does seem to be something that's inherent in what he's teaching as an approach. And like I said, with Tim Anderson, that's a great approach. With some of these other guys that are struggling like that, you just need some kind of offensive. You've seen Gavin Sheets do a really good job recently of going the opposite way with some balls. It's a good approach, like a two-strike approach or certain players, but changing players fundamentally to be something they're not or something that might provide more value is kind of, I think, where the rubber meets the road on this. Like if you're universally saying like, all right, I know, Eloy might be most valuable hitting 3-run homers, but like we want to get his batting average up a little higher. So we're going to have him try to hit more singles. It's not maybe necessarily helping your team. Like it's great that, Jose Abreu's average is up, but like he's, almost 10 home runs down from where he was at this point last year. So like those home runs equated into, the almost 30 more RBIs he had at this point last year, like even with his slow start, so those runs, it's just so many things have to go right for you to continue to chug through and be able to everybody just hit singles and doubles and keep scoring a bunch of runs. And in this game against teams like, the Yankees and the Blue Jays that can just one walk away from putting a 2-run homer on you, like you kind of need to just score more runs more reliably, and home runs are just the way to do that, especially in this ballpark that they have.
Yeah.
One side note on that, it's almost like an overcorrection to the problems with the 2007 White Sox offense, in a sense, where it was largely that year, if they didn't homer, they didn't score. And they were actually dead last in the American League in runs scored that year, but second in home runs. I don't know, it's just a random thought here, but it's almost as though like Menechino and or the White Sox offense looked at that season in isolation and said, see, home runs don't really help. And they decided to put their focus elsewhere.
Yeah. Dylan Cease and Johnny Cueto say, oh, can I have a vote here? I beg to differ. All right. Well, as we're going to wind up our first half of this podcast. Oh, yes, there are two halves. A little extended mix podcast here. Why? For this team, they don't deserve it. But hey, why not? Who knows when we'll do the next podcast? And it's not an upper. We're going to have a very constructive second half of the podcast. We're going to end on maybe a downer, or maybe some of you will say not at all. I'm going to go around the table here once again. And I need to ask, presuming it's not yet, although I think somebody's revealed already, one or two of you have, when do you give up on this team? Just 3.5 out. It's really one series away from first place. Not that it's going to happen. But Joe, I'll start again. You up in the corner. When do you give up on this team?
When that gap hits 8 games or so is when I think I would give up on them. Yeah, I'm still going with, I can't really complete, as dark as it feels today, can't give up on them entirely when no one is really taking a firm grasp of the division.
Yeah, it's true. Jordan, presuming it's not yet, when you giving up on this team?
Very soon. If it's not yet, if it's not today or last night, especially, it's whatever happens in that Astro series. If we get our asses kicked, it doesn't matter if we win the division or whatever. It's not going to matter. Nothing. The playoffs aren't going to matter. We're gonna get swept by Seattle or whoever, Baltimore. We're gonna get swept by someone in the playoffs, and then we're gonna, it doesn't matter. If we play well against the Astros, maybe I'll have some hope. But it's what if we get swept by the Astros, lose 3 out of 4 to the Astros, I think the season doesn't matter.
Okay. Yes. Well, welcome. It's a season-long contract, so you're not getting out of it. Dante, have you given up, or when will you give up? I guess you sort of already admitted, but please tell me again.
I mean, like, giving up in this case, I would guess is like they don't really matter at this point. Like, go to the playoffs, they're gonna lose.
Yeah. Don't
go to the playoffs, at least they have a higher draft pick. Like, congrats on that. Although the Rick Hahn history of draft picks,
that's not a plus.
Yeah. So, am I like, at the core, I'm a fan. I'll never truly give up. I've been watching the Bears for 26 years now. So, giving up isn't a thing. But for this season, it'll be done probably, like Jordan said. Let's see how that Astro series goes.
All right. And shout out to Papa Dante. Listen, at least we're not the Cubs. Okay. Trevor, I see just one bottle behind you. I know there are more. Have you hit that yet? Or AKA, are you giving up on this team?
I thought I was going to be the one that was going to be the least likely to give up, but Joe saying 8 games, man, if they get to 6, 7 games, I'm going to start questioning it. So, but the good thing is they do have a ton of games coming up against the 2 teams that they're chasing. So you can't quite count them out, even if they're 5 games back of the Twins, let's say, with 3 series to go. That 2 of their last 3 series are against the Twins. So theoretically they could make that ground up. So they still have time, but it's dwindling the more and more we get here into the middle of August.
Yes. Sonny Brett keeps pointing out that it's just 1 series away from being in first place, but of course it's also 1 series away from getting into the Trevor Lines zone of, I've given up, because a bad series against Detroit of all teams could put them in that territory. Okay. Adrian, I actually have a follow-up for you, but please first give me your answer on when you give up on this team.
Give up on their hopes to make the playoffs. Could be coming soon, right at the end of this stretch. They got the Tigers, then the Astros, then Cleveland. If they lose multiple, and if they lose that series to Cleveland, it might be just about when I'm going to say, like, playoffs are probably not going to happen. give up on watching the team, like it's probably not going to happen. I'm going to be there for all of these terrible games, and I really want to see it just get fun bad.
So sort of giving up, sort of not. Okay, my follow-up specifically to you, although the field can take it unless we run out of time. Given that you, at least without Celeste Redonio any longer with us, you are sort of our Leori whisperer. So my question here, as long as we're talking about quick exits from the playoffs, if you knew that his 450-foot, whatever, career best length home run in the playoffs last year was going to earn him a 3-year, $16 million contract, would you now wish that he never hit that home run?
No, because it was cool, but the one guy that I wish would listen to Frank Menechino, man, like could really benefit from that guy hitting for more average and just trying to get on base however he can. Like I said, like he's still trying to hit that home run every time up, and he's come down a little bit. He was like 11%, I think, when I wrote that article about him on like all of his fly balls. 11% of his fly balls were popped up on the infield. I think he's like 10.5% now. So he's coming down, but still 10% of your fly balls popped up on the infield. Like you have one thing on your mind when you're up there and you're trying to get under a ball and put it a long way. And that's just not his game.
Yeah, if we're not getting a full quote and it was Leuri, fuck the long balls.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a t-shirt, Adrian. That's a t-shirt. But yeah, if it was just like, hey guys, we've got you all assembled, put your breakfast down for a second, fuck the long balls.
I would love Leuri out in like, some of these games when we got these terrible defensive outfields. Like, I'd rather have him defensively out there and like whatever he can give you offensively, but like, we're not even getting that Leuri or we're going to play him at shortstop, or some premier position that we really need him to produce in. And it's unfortunate, but I can't have him go down. That home run was magical, and I appreciate it still.
Okay, we have reached our maximum allowed SB Nation recommended Leori Garcia content. So we are going to go to a break. Coming out of that break, we're going to talk a little bit bigger picture for those of this group who hang with me for that second half. Please, all of you do as well. Hang with us for about a minute, and we'll come back with second half of podcast 35 or something else. See you in a bit.